Joining us now is Adam Goldstein, who is VP of Strategic Initiatives at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, or FIRE, a group that advocates for student free speech rights. Adam, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Adam, a number of parents and school officials are concerned, but can you clarify, do students legally have the right to protest?
Students do legally have the right to protest, but walking out is not a protected way of doing that. The 1969 Supreme Court decision, Tinker versus Des Moines, came out with a rule that said students have a right to speech in the public schools when what they want to do isn't going to materially disrupt the ordinary operation of school. Unfortunately, not being there to be educated would be a material disruption of school. So while there's methods of protest, walking out is not a protected one.
Gotcha. But what are the legal limits, though, for students who are minors also protesting during school hours?
Well, it depends on the manner of protest they choose. If they're protesting by, as in the Tinker case, wearing an armband, wearing a button or a T-shirt, handing out a independent student newspaper, these would all be protected methods of protest. But the right to speech doesn't create an exception to being punished for violating other rules. And if there's an ordinary rule that stops you from walking out in every other case, it's going to stop you from walking out to protest.
Of course, school officials are responsible for conducting learning and teaching, ideally without disruptions. How do they walk the line then between doing their jobs as educators while honoring freedom of speech? Not to mention here in Texas, there's also pressure from the governor and the TEA to consider, as well as safety concerns like what happened in Buda.
Well, it's a difficult line for teachers and administrators to walk. On the one hand, they don't want to discourage students, and they want students to understand they do have First Amendment rights in virtually every other context. At the same time, they do have a legal obligation as employees of the state to discourage students from leaving school during the day and becoming truant. So the goal for the administrators and the teachers, and it should be for really all state employees, is to be able to articulate to the students what specifically the objection is with their protest, which is to say, we understand you want to express a message, we hear the message, we still have to discipline you if you choose to leave during the school day.
What's your advice for parents who are concerned about their kids engaging in these protests? What should they be considering if their child chooses to do a walk out of school protest? Civil rights icon John Lewis, of course, famously referred to the protests in the civil rights era as good trouble, but there can indeed be consequences to protesting.
Right. From the First Amendment standpoint, in terms of those consequences, by the way, the question is, are students being punished more harshly because they're choosing to walk out to go to a protest than they would be if they were choosing to be truant for some other reason? And that could still violate the First Amendment if you punish a student more harshly because you don't like what they're saying. But to answer the underlying question here about parents, whatever rights schools have to control the whereabouts of students, they do it in place of the parents, in loco parentis, right? So parents have the ability, if they want to sign their students out to go attend a protest if they want the student to protest. But I think the real conversation has to be with the discussion about consequences, right? You brought up John Lewis. Well, John Lewis did suffer consequences for his expression. And the long arc of history then proved him right. The question, and this is the conversation for parents and students, is what consequences are you willing to endure in order to participate in this protest? I mean, I would never tell someone they shouldn't protest. I can only tell them that the law wouldn't protect this action and they might be punished for it.
Could minor students participating in these protests potentially be arrested?
Well, it's not impossible, but it wouldn't, in theory anyway, be arrested for just being truant. That would be a little unusual. Ordinarily speaking, to go back to this idea of you can only punish people for engaging in the activity, not for the expression. In most places that I'm aware of, students aren't generally arrested for skipping class. So if someone was to choose to arrest them for skipping class, that would be viewpoint discrimination, which would also violate the First Amendment. Whatever is ordinarily done when someone skips class is what would have to be done here in terms of a sanction to avoid violating the First Amendment. There may be places where they ordinarily arrest people for not going to class. That hasn't been my experience.
Well, Adam, this is all very important legal context here. Thank you so much for sharing your organization's insights with us.
Glad to do it. Anything I can do, let me know.
Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave us a comment below to let us know your thoughts on this video. And don't forget, you can watch full episodes of Austin Insight for free in the PBS app.